We find ourselves at a moment that history books will likely look back on as a definitive before and after. It is easy to get lost in the noise of a rapidly moving news cycle, but today, we are pulling back the curtain to look at the machinery beneath the situation. We aren't just talking about a temporary disruption or a passing trend. We are discussing a fundamental shift in the landscape that affects how we work, how we interact, and how we plan for the future. In the next few minutes, we are going to navigate through the complexity. We will define the current reality, examine the catalysts that brought us to this edge, address the common misconceptions clouding the public's judgment, and finally, look toward the horizon at what the recovery or the new normal actually looks like. This is a situation defined by its volatility, but also by the unique opportunities it presents for those who are paying attention. To understand the gravity of where we stand, we have to look at the three primary pillars currently holding up the status quo. First, there is the immediate environmental pressure. Whether we are looking at economic indicators, social movements, or technical bottlenecks, the friction is palpable. We are seeing a level of intensity that hasn't been recorded in recent cycles. Decisions that used to take months are now being forced in a matter of days. This acceleration is the defining characteristic of our current moment. Second, we have to look at the institutional response. How are the major players, the leaders, the organizations, and the regulators reacting to this pressure? What we are seeing is a fascinating, if sometimes frustrating, mix of extreme caution and desperate aggression. Some are doubling down on legacy systems, hoping the storm will pass, while others are tearing up the rulebook entirely. This divergence is creating a massive gap in the market and in our social fabric. Finally, there is the human element. Beyond the data and the headlines, there is a collective psychological weight. Public sentiment is currently suspended between a sense of deep-seated anxiety and a resilient kind of hope. People are waiting for a signal, a sign that the floor has been found. Until that signal arrives, we remain in a state of high-alert observation. It is tempting to view our current situation as a black swan event, something that came out of nowhere to disrupt an otherwise stable world. But a closer look reveals that the seeds of this situation were planted a long time ago. We are currently living through the harvest of a dozen different decisions made over the last several years. We can point to a few specific dominoes that fell in sequence. It started with a subtle policy shift that many overlooked at the time. This created a vacuum, a space where risk could grow without oversight. Then came the external pressures, global market shifts, and changing social expectations that began to squeeze that vacuum. The breaking point wasn't a single event, but rather the moment these internal weaknesses met an external shock. It's a classic feedback loop. One small failure began to reinforce another, creating a compounding effect. What was once a manageable ripple in the pond has become a tidal wave, not because the wave itself was so large, but because the barriers we had in place were already weathered and thin. Whenever a situation reaches this level of complexity, misinformation and oversimplification follow close behind. One of the biggest myths currently circulating is that there is a quick fix, a single policy, or a single technological breakthrough that will return us to the way things were. The reality is far more nuanced. We aren't going back to the way things were. We are moving towards something entirely different. The biggest challenge we face moving forward isn't actually the problem itself. It is the logistics of the transition. We are looking at massive hurdles in infrastructure, communication, and basic human cooperation. Furthermore, there is a common misconception that this situation is a zero-sum game, where for one side to win, another must lose. In reality, the interconnectedness of our current world means that a failure in one sector inevitably bleeds into the others. The solution, therefore, cannot be siloed. It requires a level of horizontal thinking that our current systems aren't necessarily built for. So, where does this leave us as we look toward the coming months? In the short term, we should expect continued volatility. We are in a period of price discovery, not just in a financial sense, but in a social and structural sense. We are finding out what our institutions are actually worth and what our communities are actually capable of. There will be more friction before there is smooth sailing. However, the long-term outlook is where the real story lies. This situation is forcing a level of innovation that wouldn't have been possible in peacetime. We are seeing the birth of new systems, the streamlining of old ones, and a renewed focus on what is actually essential. We are at a crossroads where the old ways of operating are no longer viable, and while that is frightening, it is also the most fertile ground for growth. As we move forward, the focus will shift from damage control to reconstruction. The question won't be how do we stop this, but rather what do we build with the pieces that remain?